If you take a look at where the world is and where we're going, there are huge problems in the world to be solved. And I believe engineers are at the fundamental basis of being able to help us address those problems. What would you say to engineers who are looking at things like creating cleaner water, creating a cleaner environment? What would you say to them in terms of what they should be thinking about in addressing the world's hardest problems?
But they're all incremental change. You haven't changed the fundamental system. But if you don't have air for 3 to 4 minutes, you're dead. If you have to breathe polluted air constantly, you're sick. Surely air is our greatest need to stay alive. And then I talk about, you and I, we're 70% water by weight. What are we doing to air, water, soil, photosynthetic energy?
So I know that you spend or have spent a lot of time studying indigenous communities and how they look at the earth and how they look at building. Do you want to talk a little bit about that? And through my research, I've actually taken a look at, are there indigenous engineers and what have they been doing? And some of those that I've been reading about have been doing a lot in the area of supporting clean water or clean energy. Do you feel that if you take the principles of the indigenous and bring that more into the workforce, that that's part of a solution?
No, but the way you're seeing it, you see those engineers working for, of course, indigenous communities have embraced solar and wind. They're doing all kinds of the right things, but they still exist within the economic system. They have to live within the constraints of the economic system. And everything I'm telling you about air, water, and soil, I learned all of that from indigenous people. You see, the crisis is this. For 99% of human existence, we lived within the perspective that sees we are one strand in a web of relationships with air, water, soil, and sunlight, and our relatives, the plants and animals, that cleanse and recycle those basic fundamental needs. And that's called an ecocentric perspective. And indigenous people all over the planet, that's how they've lived. And in that ecocentric way of seeing the world, whatever you do shakes the web and therefore has responsibility. And that's the most fundamental thing that they tell me. And the most important thing, they always promise that we will act in a better way, that we will act in a good way to ensure nature can continue to be generous. And it's that reciprocity that is missing in the way that modern society lives.
If we want to reverse, if we want to at least stagnate where we are and not go further, what do you want them to do?
Well, as I say, they all have to be working on an alternate economic system. And there are examples, Kate Raworth's donut economy, the circular economy. This is happening at the ground level. But we've got to abandon the idea that steady growth is even possible.
So how do we coexist?
Well, the first thing you do is much greater humility and to understand that we're not the top dog, that our existence and well-being is dependent on this web of relationships with all other species of animals and plants, with the air, water, soil, and biodiversity. That's the fundamental shift. You are operating within the anthropocentric perspective that sees humans at the top of a pyramid. We're at the top and everything down below is for us. So that's what has to be done. If we make the transition, and that's what indigenous people retain, is an ecocentric perspective. They don't have all the answers. We're going to need technology for sure once we get in, but it's got to be within that ecocentric perspective.